It's June, you know what that means.
I pretend that's a different month of the year in order to justify today's video topic.
So, happy Halloween, everybody. You know what is truly scary? When something that isn't typically scary pulls the rug from under you, startling you for but a moment. Even if it isn't meant to be shocking, it still sticks with you. And this phenomena is very notable with Nintendo games. There is no shortage of people talking about them on the internet, and surprise, surprise, I'm no exception. So, I'm gonna ramble on about a bunch of these moments that stood out to me in particular. Now, feel free to turn down the lights and pull up the covers as we take a look at a bunch of games that spooked the ever-loving hell out of me as a child. Oh, and by the way, we're gonna be talking about spoilers for all of these games, so if you don't want to hear them, feel free to just skip around using the chapters. Like, you know how it works. Metroid 2 is what I consider to be the earliest example of Nintendo doing something not necessarily kid-friendly. The original Metroid was eerie, yes, but I couldn't say that it was particularly frightening as I was playing through it. It was more so of an action platformer where the focus was placed on discovering where the hell you were, but Metroid 2 is a different beast altogether. Being on the Game Boy, naturally there were many more limitations on it than the NES, and it is because of these limitations that this game ends up having a much more dour tone. For one, the resolution is much smaller, being 160 by 144 pixels rather than the NES's 256 by 224. That's significant, and if you want to show a detailed sprite, well, you better bet that's going to take up a huge chunk of the screen. And that's what happened with our lovely Samus Aran. As a result, there isn't much else on the screen besides Samus during gameplay. What this means is that the game itself feels claustrophobic. As you're exploring the depths of SR388, it feels like anything could pop out at any time, and you'd only have a moment to react before you get smacked into next week. And this does happen. Often. When you encounter a Metroid, it genuinely feels terrifying, with the next 30 seconds being a rapid scramble for survival. And when you start encountering Metroids in their later evolution stages, it instantly causes panic. There were actual moments where I got jump scared playing this game, and I had to take a few seconds after an encounter to collect myself. It certainly doesn't help that all these bastards look incredibly gross for being on the Game Boy. And it's not just the visuals, I'd also like to highlight Metroid 2's use of music, or rather, the lack of it at points, as Metroid 2 is one of the earliest examples I can see of a video game using silence as a method of building tension. There will be points in which you enter a new area and the music just cuts out, leaving you exploring an eerie environment with nothing but the footsteps of Samus to keep you company. Or maybe they'll play like a few notes in the background and then cut back out again. It does a fantastic job of just keeping you on your toes. And this one reason is why I like going back to this game instead of Samus Returns or AM2R. And that's because I feel like this is an aspect of the game that was never really adopted by either of these remakes and is wholly unique to the original. With the limitations of the Game Boy, the environments could not be fully fleshed out, and the zoom-in camera view led to a lot of tension. This led to the player feeling much more unease, whereas with AM2R and Samus Returns, these environments are not only very detailed, but don't really capture that darker tone that I felt when I was playing through the original. They also never particularly use silence like the original did, as AM2R focuses solely on putting out certified bangers, while Samus Returns remixes Norfair for the 78th time. It's because of this that I still like going back to the original Metroid 2 from time to time, as not only is it very short, but it has this vibe to it that I can't really find anywhere else. Earthbound is weird, but that's no surprise to you, I'm sure. The Mother series has always been one of the more mature franchises that Nintendo has developed, and Earthbound in particular is the most horrific in terms of visuals and tone. While the majority of the game is set in this happy 90s era America, there are many sections of the game that will have you going, what in the ever-loving fuck am I experiencing? Ranging from this town being run by a cult, worshipping a golden statue, or one being overrun by zombies, but by far the most terrifying part of this game is the encounter with the final boss, Gygus. Gygus. Throughout Earthbound, Gygus is referred to as a universal cosmic destroyer, hell-bent on annihilating Earth. However, we're not really told in any definite terms what he exactly is. At the end of the game, the party has to travel back in time to the point where Gygus gains the strength to destroy the world. And when the party approaches, you see that Gygus is contained in this machine, And it's not even exactly a machine, it looks like this H.R. Giger biomechanical abomination. Funnily enough, Metroid is actually heavily influenced by Alien, which H.R. Giger was a designer for, so if I had a nickel for every Nintendo franchise that was influenced by H.R. Giger in some way, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. It's only now that we actually find out what the deal with Gygus is, when the party is told that Gygus has become so powerful that it shattered his own mind and body, and now he's essentially a primordial, intangible concept of pure evil. The only thing keeping him in check is this machine that he's contained in. So naturally, he gets released from the machine, causing the battle screen to devolve into this twisted face that only gets more and more distorted as he continues to take damage. You can't even comprehend the nature of his attacks, and the only words Gygus can say are, "I'm so sad, Ness. It's not right." These groans of pain, "Ness, I'm happy. Friends, and it hurts. It hurts." As all this static plays in the background, for lack of a better word. And when he finally disappears through the power of prayer, everything turns into this blood-red CRT static before finally vanishing. This entire sequence is by far the most disturbed I've ever been when playing a Nintendo game. I don't think I've ever seen any sort of eldritch horror as a boss in a Nintendo game before, or since, and I don't think that there will be another one anytime soon. The reason I feel like this entire sequence works so well is because of the lack of concrete information leading into it. We hear talk about Gygus throughout the game, but it seems more like he is a person who has the ability to manipulate the evil within people rather than a cosmic force. And it's the defiance of these expectations that leads to the player going, "What the hell is this?" and "I want to turn off the console." The moment you walk up to the Devil's Machine, you no longer feel you have any control over the situation, or have any idea of how to handle what's in front of you. And Poki's subsequent explanations about the nature of Gygus further compound that, leading to this feeling of helplessness and dread, which is only amplified by the visuals and the audio and the dialogue surrounding Gygus. I'm very glad I played this game as a teenager, because if I played this game as a child, I'm pretty sure I would have never picked up a Nintendo game ever again. A+. And now we've reached the Nintendo 64, and you probably know about all these games, so it's time for the lightning round! Super Mario 64. Big Boo's haunt is kinda creepy, the background music's very good at making you feel uneasy, and when that piano comes to life, isn't that scary? Wow! In Ocarina of Time, the Shadow Temple is covered in bloodstains, and it's implied that the Kingdom of Hyrule has an entire dark history of torturing their enemies here. Oh, and oh man, who can forget Dead Hand? Just look at this little guy, isn't he adorable? I'd give him a big kiss, big ol' kiss, right there, right on the mouth, right there. Majora's Mask as an entire game is an existential nightmare about an entire kingdom's worth of people trying to accept their incoming death within 3 days. The moon's about to fall, and the way you see the people spend their last moments is terrifying in a more psychological way, as it gets you to think about your own life and how you're spending it. Honestly, this entire game deserves its own video. In level 4-4 of Super Mario 3D Land, if you wait in the corner by the flagpole, you'll see a ghost fade in and out of the background. Ain't that wacky? There's also something similar in Super Mario Galaxy 2 and Shiverburn Galaxy. If you go into first-person view, you'll see a bunch of shadowy figures watching you, ready to jump Mario for his J's. Now that's terrifying. In Pokemon X and Y in Lumio City, if you go to the second floor of a certain office building, the lights will flicker and a ghost will appear saying, "No, you're not the one," and refuse to play our walking animation. Insane. Mario & Luigi Paper Jam. This game sucks, and that's terrifying to me, personally. Luigi's Mansion. This game is a fucking anomaly. In what world would Luigi Wandering a Haunted Mansion be a launch title for a Nintendo system? Who decided that a game full of darkness with ghosts wandering the halls should have a Mario character be the main protagonist and also be the title for advertising a new console? Because to whoever made that decision, I would like to emphatically shake their hand, and also slap them for scaring the shit out of a 6-year-old me. There isn't any particular moment in Luigi's Mansion that I'd like to highlight, but instead, I just want to take a look at its overall vibe. Luigi's Mansion, I wouldn't necessarily say is a scary game, but it's the overall lighting, sound design, and lore that I feel give this game its darker tone. Like, look at this. You can see that as Luigi is wandering, the environment is very dark. Anything that isn't within your flashlight's range is pretty damn hard to see. The rooms are also fairly small in size, so not only are the areas usually cramped and dark, but the sudden appearances of the ghosts feel much more impactful as a result. This is kind of my main complaint with Luigi's Mansion 2 and 3, is that the environments are too well lit and open to really feel scary, in contrast to the first game here, where the only real open area is the roof. As you're wandering around, the music carries this general spooky tone and is also a general bop, which is a nice change of pace from the main song that plays in this mansion, Eternal Silence. Since I went on and on about this in the Metroid 2 section, I won't waste too much time on it, but cutting out music when you get to a new and dark area is a fantastic way to build a sense of tension and suspense with the player, and Luigi's Mansion utilizes this all the time, as whenever you enter a new room, the music will tend to cut out, just leaving you with the sultry sounds of Luigi. Hell yeah. There are also these more humanoid ghosts spread throughout the mansion that are considered portrait ghosts, who were originally imprisoned in paintings made by Professor E. Gadd. When you capture one, it'll add a lore entry into your Game Boy Horror. Some of these are pretty standard insights into their previous lives, some of them are just silly, but there are also some that are a little messed up. Two that I'd like to note are Mr. Lugs, who ate himself to death but still wasn't satisfied, and Sue P, for whom what was meant to be a short nap seems to have turned into eternal rest for sweet Sue P. It's these little tidbits that do everything for me. Since then, Luigi's Mansion 2 was a much more cartoony spin on this formula, focusing more on slapstick humor and not really acknowledging any of these darker aspects. Luigi's Mansion 3 was a step in the right direction, as the second, third, and fifth floors I felt were very good with their moody atmosphere, but then the rest of the game goes back into the Luigi's Mansion 2 silliness, which isn't necessarily bad, but I miss those slightly darker tones that the first game had. Regardless, let's move on to the next game. Pikmin 2 is rather infamous for a Nintendo game, commonly being referred to as one of the hardest games they've released. In Pikmin 2, you have to venture into these caves beneath the earth in search of treasure, and it is in one of these where something rather unexpected happens. Normally, you get to explore each of these caves at your own pace, but in the submerged castle, if you spend 5 minutes on a single floor, then you'll have a rather unpleasant meeting with this gentleman, as he tells you to get off his property while advertising his Second Amendment rights. The Water Wraith is completely invulnerable, and will not hesitate to annihilate all of your Pikmin as if he just discovered the 100-pin bowling Easter egg in Wii Sports Resort. Strike! He isn't particularly scary, but he still finds a way to strike you with pure fear. Every floor feels like a mad dash for treasure where any dawdling can result in your death. It creates a tension so thick that you couldn't cut it with a butter knife. That shit requires a great sword filled with the screams of 1,000 demons. Needless to say, I did not personally cope with this area that well, and that experience still sticks with me to this day, since it was so much of a contrast compared to the rest of the game. Twilight Princess is by far the Zelda with the most overtly dark tone. You look at a majority of the scenes in this game, and it's hard to not be blasted with gloom. The whole premise of the game is that the leader of the Twilight Realm, Zant, has invaded the land of Hyrule, turning the lands into this eternal realm of dusk, and it's your job to turn everything back to normal and defeat Zant. And it's these zones of twilight that I want to highlight. The environments look all hazy and foggy with this yellow tint spread throughout. You can see these black squares rising up from the ground, spinning all the way up into the sky, which makes it feel more ethereal. And with these environments, I really feel the lower resolution of the GameCube sells this aesthetic with the more grungy looking textures, not to mention the long, dissonant chords playing in the background that really take this overall dour and melancholy feel to the next level. There's also these twilight beasts that reside within them that are humanoid yet not. They have these long arms yet short legs and tentacles falling from their heads, reminiscent of that Lovecraftian sort of aesthetic. Seeing these barren lands filled with these creatures along with the music and lighting just inspires this sense of dread. And the actual people within the game, they've been turned into spirits, only visible as a blue flame unless you use your senses to see their actual appearance. And when you do so, it limits your vision to only what's around you. And all of a sudden, it feels much more dangerous now that you can't see what's around you, with only this one other person to keep you company. The Twilight is just somber, unsettling, and grounding, and it's because of that it still sticks out in my mind. And also the bugs. I fucking hate these bugs. Please keep them away from me. You do not understand how much these fuckers terrified me. And I haven't even talked about some of the cutscenes in this game, as some of these genuinely scared me as a kid. Like, there's this one cutscene where the Triforce is explained to the player. It tells of a history where after the goddesses left, the Triforce was fought over in countless battles, and all of the people are represented by a Link and Ilia with pure white eyes, as well as a bunch of dark Links. And the symbolism within this cutscene is just... whoa. There's also this famous cutscene with Yetta, a mountain yeti, who is hiding a fragment of the Mirror of Twilight. As you and her approach the mirror, she begins to twitch and stare into the reflection, just constantly remarking on how pretty the mirror is. She then transforms into Blazetta, the final boss of the dungeon. There's just so many small things within this game that dip their toes into the pool of angst and then pull it back out, and the game is so much better for it. Super Paper Mario is by far one of the most unique Mario games I've ever played. And considering that the game is a platformer and not one of the RPGs, like that's saying a lot. I could talk about the story of this game on its own for fucking hours. And who knows, I might someday. But there are several moments in this game that just make me think, damn, they really just threw this shit in an E for everyone game, huh? The Paper Mario series has been kind of known to deal with some adult situations every now and then, with the Thousand Year Door actually just showing a beatdown in the background of one of the first few cutscenes, and there's an entire side quest around the mob. But it was Super that I felt really took this to the next level. In Chapter 2, you have to search for a Pure Heart in Merle's mansion, and it's in the last level that shit starts to get crazy. As you're exploring the depths trying to find Merle, you end up finding her and she starts saying stuff about how she'll give you the Pure Heart if you end up signing this contract. And as you keep saying no, she'll keep sweetening the deal. After as many no's as you'll get from your insurance provider, she'll reveal herself as one of Count Bleck's minions, Meanie the Shapeshifter. It looks like you'll have to get ready for a fight, and then she ends up doing this. What in the ever-loving hell? So, not only does she snap her own neck, not only does she turn into a spider, but she is fully invincible, and now you have to run for your life throughout the mansion trying to find the real Merle before she catches up to you. All of a sudden, the mansion music feels more frantic than it did before, even though it doesn't, actually change, and there's nothing like the feeling of being constantly lost while you're escaping a barely comprehensible threat. And this isn't the first time that she'll do this, by the way. She'll continue to do it throughout the game and in your nightmares. You're welcome. But this isn't the only part of the game that terrified me, oh no. This game punts you straight into the literal underworld. In World 7, you end up exploring the realm of death in order to find a Pure Heart. And it is here that you get given a door key and end up having to discover where it goes. Well, it just so happens that there is a river running straight through the level, with a ferryman that takes you across, very reminiscent of the River Styx. In fact, it's very on the nose since it's called the River Twigs. You can see where I'm going with this, right? To find this door, you need to voluntarily jump into this river. And as you sink to the bottom, the music fades out and you start to see hands move in and try to grasp you, pulling you even deeper. These wailing synths start to come in and it starts to feel like you've actually just thrown your life away by jumping into this pool. And even when you've reached the bottom, it's not immediately obvious what you're supposed to do. So you just end up wandering around the bottom as this music plays in the background with all these different hands flailing about. Honestly, the moment I started hearing that music, I immediately began swimming back to the surface, because you know what? Fuck that! But it ends up being the only way forward. And what do you get as a reward for this?
Super Luigi Galaxy!
Yeah, pretty cool. Oh man, another Zelda game. Who could have seen this coming? It's almost like these games have a really creative team behind them or something. The Ancient Cistern is one of my favorite dungeons in the Zelda series, and that is because it is based around a certain story. In the center of the Ancient Cistern is a statue resembling the Buddha in a legally distinct manner. Within this dungeon, you'll end up venturing to the bottom, where you'll see this purple-hued room filled with bones and a lone treasure chest in the middle. In order to reach this area, you need to ride the statue as an elevator, then raise the statue back up in order to access the chest. And the moment you enter these depths from the statue, you'll see zombified bokoblins and a poisoned river. The moment you cross it, you find a sun-filled room with a lone spider strand that you have to climb. And when you start climbing, these zombies appear and try to pull you right back down into hell. Once you reach the top, you pull a lever that raises the statue back up, which of course means that you need to voluntarily jump back down there. It's such a cool set piece. Like, the entire upper floor of this dungeon is verdant, lush, with clear flowing water, lily pads, and it feels like you're walking through a living, breathing paradise. In contrast, this dark underworld is such a nice flip side, and it makes this dungeon unforgettable. This dungeon appears to be based off of a famous story about the Buddha called the Spider's Thread, where the Buddha lowers a spider's thread into hell for a criminal Kandata to climb, and Kandata starts climbing it to reach paradise. However, the other sinners begin to climb the thread as well, and Kandata, fearing the string will break, cries out that the string is for only him to climb, and it is actually his selfishness that causes the spider's thread to break, sending him back into hell. If you have any sort of knowledge on Buddhism, this central theme of the dungeon hits harder all the more, and knowing that makes this dungeon feel all the more somber. Once again, not particularly scary, but it's this small little flash of darkness that makes this moment of the game live rent-free in my head. Unfortunately, it's here that we have to take a rather far leap into the future. After the release of, and even a little before the release of Skyward Sword, it becomes much harder to find these flashes of darkness within a Nintendo game, as this is where we really begin what I call the sterile era, where Nintendo would mostly focus on palatable games that are meant to appeal solely to large audiences, with Mario being relegated to being like solely 2D platformers, Metroid and Mother ceased to exist a long time ago, and Zelda is busy doing this. And even in the Switch era, it's hard to find Nintendo doing anything that isn't fully kid-friendly. Sure, there are at least moments of uniqueness now, with Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, and Mario Wonder all doing these weird and wacky wonderful things, but we never really got that sense of dread. You see where I'm going with this? It's because I'm going to be talking about Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread was a complete breath of fresh air as a first-party Nintendo game. Not only are we back to dark, dank environments, but we are back to absolutely torturing the player. The opening 2 hours of Metroid Dread are the most nerve-wracking that I've ever experienced. Not only are you starting in a completely unknown area with none of your power-ups, but you're starting in the deepest center of the planet ZDR and have to make your way out. There are plenty of new monsters in your way, and it feels like you're constantly left in the dark with no clue about what's going on, excluding the massive info dump that Adam gives you.
Samus, Ravenbeak is super cool and strong. You never beat him. He goes to the gym 3 times a week and adds 3 scoops of creatine to his energy drinks. He's crafted a 6-pack so strong it conducted mitosis and now has a 12-pack. You'd be cream, Samus.
And so on. But those moments without Adam feel like you're alone with all of this wildlife and that every single thing is out to get you. There's this one moment where you can see an invisible monster shifting in the background as it crawls into a pipe, and it instantly caused me to freeze in place out of instinct. The planet feels alive, and not in a welcoming way. And not just with wildlife, but with something that isn't actually alive, the Emmys. Emmys are scouting robots that were sent to ZDR by the Federation, and they've been hacked to be hostile to Samus. So if you ever enter an area with an Emmy, you're instantly pushed into either stealth mode or run for your fucking life mode. You may have noticed something over these past few games, and it is that I am terrified of games that force me to run away from something. Doubly so if they're invincible, and triply so if it expects me to get somewhere or do something while I'm doing so. And you'd be right. There is nothing that gets my blood pumping more or gets me to remember it better than something that scares the crap out of me in an otherwise ordinary game. Especially so if the game decides, let's put in some really high-tempo music the moment you start being chased, like Metroid Dread does. The moment I get seen by an Emmy isn't just a moment of, oh shit, I've been seen, it's an, oh shit, the music is kicking in, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, oh god, oh fuck. And the moment that you gain the ability to destroy one of these things is just, oh... There's nothing like it in the world. Until you find the next one in the following area that also just has some bullshit superpower like the ability to freeze you in place and is just aggravating rather than actually scary. Metroid Dread is a welcome turn to form, not just for the series, but for Nintendo as a whole, and I'm praying that Metroid Prime 4 will be even, like, half as creepy as Dread was. So, I think I'll end up closing it out there for today. There's no doubt that I missed plenty of moments or Nintendo games in general that were terrifying to you, but I tried to keep it to games that I've played that I don't really see talked about as much. Hopefully you had a good trip down memory lane, so feel free to talk about some of your favorite dark moments within Nintendo games in the comments below. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to change the current revolution of the Earth to go back to June.